Hey first grade, today for our interactive read aloud on Thursday, April 9th, we are going to reread The Moon Book by Gail Gibbons, but we are actually going to be reading different parts of the book this time. So we haven't already read these pages, so they will be new to you, but they are going to be focusing on the moon phases today. So this is going to be day 18 as far as our tasks go, and so our vocabulary that we are adding today are phases, crescent, waxing, quarter, gibbous, and waning. So we are adding those vocabulary words to our list. Those are going to be the focus words that you want to use whenever your task says include vocabulary. It's very important to include those in your vocabulary task. So, The Moon Book by Gail Gibbons. As the sun sets at the end of each day, the sky becomes darker and darker. On many clear nights, our moon shines brightly in the night sky. So, the author says the moon is bright in the night sky. Why is that? How does the moon look bright in the night sky? Our moon is the brightest and biggest light in our night sky. It outshines all the stars and planets which appear as small points of light. Some planets have many moons. Earth has one. So a star burns gases that give off heat and light. The sun is a star. A planet reflects sunlight and revolves around the sun. Earth is a planet. Our moon looks big and bright because it is so close to Earth compared to the faraway stars and planets. It is about 238,900 miles away. The moon makes no light of its own to shine. It is bright in the night sky because it reflects the sun's light. It is about 1/4 the size of Earth. It is made up of rock and dust. There is no air or sign of light. So the moon is about 2,000 miles in diameter and about 6,800 miles around. Earth is about 8,000 miles in diameter and about 25,000 miles around. So notice all the pictures are showing you where the sunlight is coming from and showing you what part of the Earth and the moon would be illuminated because of that sunlight. Most astronomers and other scientists think our moon formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Some believe something collided with Earth that tossed out a cloud of rock and debris. While orbiting around Earth, the rock and debris came together to form the moon. So astronomers study the planets, their moons and stars, and orbit is the path of one object around another. So this one says Earth only has one moon. So how does the moon move? How does it move around the Earth? So through those pages that we've talked about, how do we know? Okay, we've already read these pages, and I do not believe this pertains to anything today. The moon is the Earth's only natural satellite. It takes about 1 month for the moon to travel around Earth. So, how does the moon move? The moon makes one complete rotation for each complete trip around Earth. Thus, the same side of the moon is always facing Earth. The moon appears to change shape, but it doesn't. The different shapes we see are called phases of the moon. We are seeing different amounts of light being reflected on the moon. How much light we see depends on the position of Earth, moon, and sun. So the moon is still there. The whole moon, but only light reflecting on part of it. So the phases of the moon. So so far, what have you learned causes the moon to look like it is changing? And how does the amount of light reflected on the moon change? So let's look at these illustrations of the phases of the moon. We're going to look at the first 3 phases, or first 3 pictures. What do you see during the new moon phase? And why? So during a new moon, which it looks all dark, you don't see any of the moon being illuminated. During a new moon, the moon is almost directly behind the sun and Earth. The moon looks dark. We see no reflected light. What does a crescent moon look like? So a crescent moon, in a few days, so after the new moon, in a few days, a little bit of sunlight of the sunlit side of the moon starts to show. It forms a crescent. So when you start with a new moon, and then the moon slice that is getting bigger, it's starting to show itself and get bigger, that's when the moon is waxing. It's going to be looking like it's getting bigger every night. Then we have the first quarter moon. So what does the first quarter moon look like? When the moon is a quarter of its way around Earth, it is in its first quarter phase. We see it as half lit. It is sometimes called a half moon. So again, this little sliver that started to show, that side now got bigger. So it's still waxing. It's still getting bigger in the night sky every night. So how do the illustrations on this page help you understand the meaning of waxing or getting bigger? Excuse me. Okay, using the illustrations on this page, we're now going to explain a few different moons that we haven't talked about yet. Gibbous moon. So I want you to be thinking about how you could explain the 2 gibbous moons and how they're different. So this gibbous moon, we just went from the first quarter moon, where the moon was a new moon and then a crescent and then the half moon or first quarter, and now it's a little bit bigger, and this is called a gibbous moon. But this is the waxing gibbous moon because it's when the moon is getting bigger. So when the moon is waxing between the first quarter, which was half, and a full moon, it's called a gibbous moon. So then a few days later, you're going to see a full moon. So in total, about 2 weeks have passed since the new moon. So you have the new moon where you can't see any reflection at all for a few days, a day or two, and then a crescent moon, and then a quarter moon, and then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more lit up until you see the full moon. So that takes about 2 weeks. Then it's still moving. So it was showing us more and more and more and more till we see the full moon. And now it's going to look like it's getting smaller over here. It's going to start looking like it's getting smaller, but really it's just how much is being reflected by sunlight. So now it's going the other way. So this is called waning, when it looks like it's getting smaller. The moon is waning when the lit surface we see is getting smaller. When the moon is waning between the full moon and the last quarter moon, it's a gibbous again. So explain the difference between these two gibbous moons. Then we have the last quarter moon. So again, it was the full moon, then it went to the gibbous, and now it's the last quarter, so only half of it is lit. When the moon is 3/4 of its way around Earth, it is in its last quarter phase. Again, we see it as half lit, and sometimes it is called a half moon. Then that piece gets a little smaller, and it looks like another crescent moon. Once again, we see a small sliver of moon shining in the sky. And then once that little sliver goes away, about 2 more weeks have passed, and we're back to a new moon. So to go from new moon to new moon is about 1 month. It takes the moon about 1 month to go through its entire set of phases. People used to know the time of the month by watching the moon's phases. So you talked about how the 2 gibbous moons were different. So I want you to also think about how the 2 crescent moons are different. What does waning mean? And how do you know? When does waning start? And how long does it take the moon to go through all the phases? Excuse me, I'm so sorry. The moon's orbit around Earth is usually tilted slightly compared to Earth's orbit around the sun. Because of this, the moon cannot exactly line up between the sun and Earth. But when the moon's orbit is not tilted and the moon lines up exactly between sun and Earth, a solar eclipse happens. This actually just happened a few years ago. We were able to see that pretty well locally. We were able to see a solar eclipse in the middle of the day. It was pretty awesome. So this is kind of what that looks like. You can make a sun projector to see a picture of what a solar eclipse would look like. Do not ever look directly at a solar eclipse. The sun's rays can still hurt your eyes. So for this activity or project, you can poke a pin through the center of a heavy piece of paper that is bigger than this book, so bigger than your hand, your parent's hand. Stand with your back to the sun and hold the projector at your shoulder so that the sunlight shines through the hole. Hold another piece of heavy paper in your other hand. This is your screen. Move both papers until an image of the eclipse appears on the screen. So, looking at all of these moon phases, does the moon really change shape? Alright, so the rest of this we have already read, or we do not need to read, so we're going to stop there. And for today, there's actually a collaborative task, which we would have done as a class. And I'm going to move the book out of the way, because this is a pretty big thing I want to show you. So this is a project that we would have done as a class, and every table or every pair of students would have been assigned a different moon phase. But for the sake of today's lesson and doing it online, I went ahead and made one, and then you all can make one at home as well. So this is just a complete picture of the phases of the moon. So you start with the new moon. So you can see the moon outlined here, but you can't see any of the light reflected. So this is the new moon, and everything up till the full moon. This is the waxing stages. This is when it's getting bigger. So from new moon to full moon, it's waxing. It's getting bigger. So new moon, crescent moon, first quarter moon, gibbous moon, and then we hit the full moon. So that's the first half of the moon phases. And then the second half are waning. This is when they're getting smaller now, because we are at the full moon, so it can't get any bigger than that. It's going to start getting smaller. But is it really getting smaller and bigger? No. It's just what's being reflected. So the full moon, then we go back down where a little bit is not reflected, back to a gibbous moon. Then we're back to half or last quarter moon, and then crescent again. So you all are more than welcome to make a project like this at home and hang it up in your bedroom so that you can see and get familiar with the phases of the moon. This is something that you are definitely going to be hearing about and learning about for several years to come. So you have to be very familiar with it. So make this, hold on to it, use it, and refer back to it so that you can see. I just used construction paper, and I used a lid of a cup to trace the moon, and then from there I just cut different parts off of the moon. So do that as a family. That would be a fun little project. And so then we move into our actual task for today. And for your task, it is task 18, and it is asking you, it says tomorrow, so task 19, tomorrow we're going to be writing a letter to Monica from Papa, Please Get the Moon for Me. But before we do that, we need to make sure we understand the phases of the moon. Explain why the shape of the moon appears to change. Be sure to include a topic, facts from the text, vocabulary words, and a sense of closure. So my example of what that might sound like would be: the moon looks like it changes shape, but it doesn't. The moon doesn't shine light on its own. It reflects light from the sun. We see different shapes of light on the moon because the earth orbits the sun. Sometimes we see a lot of light reflected on the moon, and sometimes we don't see any at all. So if you all have any questions about the reading or the task or the project today, just let me know. The project is not required. That is just kind of if you all want to do something fun together. It will definitely be beneficial for the rest of our tasks and for years to come. Let me know if you all need anything at all.